So just in your own words, Cynthia, what phenomena are you seeing happen and what are your thoughts about it? Can you just give us a little background, what's happening now and what you think?
Yes, the Newsom administration has ordered another mass release of inmates from the Department of Correction who were not entitled to be released. Now, there are a lot of other programs that qualify inmates for early release, like Prop 57. These are purely due to the coronavirus. He released about 10,000 early on in about April, May. Now he's ordering the release of 8,000 more inmates who have not served their time. And I believe this sets up a public safety disaster for California.
Have we what kind of prisoners are these? Are they the nonviolent kind? What kind are we talking here?
Well, it depends on what you call nonviolent. The governor is not releasing someone who is in prison currently on a violent offense, but these people that he is releasing have very long violent records, or they wouldn't be in prison to begin with, because AB 109 and Prop 47 really, those laws prohibit anybody from going to prison that doesn't have a bad record or a strike prior. So I took a look at some of those inmates that are going to be released to Kern County. And what I saw was pretty consistent. They had long, violent records. Ex-felon with a gun with strike priors. Gang members who have possession of guns with strike priors. Car thieves who have many car theft convictions with strike priors. And so we have violent felons. They have a history of violence, but it's the particular case that they're in prison on. The governor is calling them non-violent felons because their current offense, which landed them in prison for, the 15th time, is not violent.
Now you
But they
mentioned
continue to plague our community.
Yeah, you mentioned public safety as being a big one there. Are we aware on how many prisoners will be coming to the Kern County area as part of this release?
We really don't. I have some initial lists that put it about 200 in the next little while, about 50 within the next 2 weeks. And now these are over and above people who are being released all the time. Who are being paroled, people are getting the advantage of Prop 57 early release. These are just extra inmates that should have done their time. But it looks to be about 50, and I have the names, and it looks to be in the next little while about 148 more, but I could be receiving other lists. So I'm not entirely sure because the inmates are making application at this time for early release.
Would it be accurate for me to report that so far the preliminary list showed that there may be 200 coming here?
There will be 200. At a minimum, there will be 200, and there may be more because the Department of Corrections is still taking applications from the inmates releasing or requesting early release.
Right. Okay. And you're talking about a public safety hazard. How have we seen the early release of prisoners in the past affect public safety here in the Kern County community?
Well, it gives violent felons an opportunity to reoffend, which they continue to do. We wish these inmates the best of luck. We hope that they get their act together and stop committing crimes. But what we've seen in the past is not the case. The best indicator about someone, whether they will offend, is looking at their record in the past. And so we have the majority of these inmates have strike priors. What is a strike prior? It is an attempted murder, a robbery, a residential burglary. These types of very violent crimes. These are the type of inmate that is going to be released early back into society. But really, we believe this governor, I believe this governor is really only using this pandemic as an excuse to do what he wanted to do all along, and that is the wholesale release of violent offenders. And he's done it in a lot of different ways with paroles, commutations, pardons, and now he's doing it with using COVID as an excuse to do that now. And it's not that I am not without compassion for inmates. I don't want these inmates to get sick. I don't. But I have more compassion for victims of crime, victims in the past who've been victimized by these violent felonies, and future victims who these inmates will victimize when they get out on the streets.
Right. And one of the things that I think one of the institutions that are getting a lot of pressure are our local jails.
Absolutely.
What have you seen there?
Well, what we're seeing in our local jails is the Department of Corrections will not accept our inmates who have been sentenced to prison. And there are about 270 of those that are waiting to go to prison. Well, what does that mean for our jail population? That means that 270 people who should be in the county jail, either waiting for trial or doing a felony sentence or misdemeanor sentence, there's no room. So they get kicked out. So we see all those felons and misdemeanors on our streets because the governor is not accepting inmates into the state prison.
For me, hearing something like that, not as a partner of the media, but just as a resident in Kern County, I'm going, whoa, these guys are being released back here. What are we going to do about it? So what is the DA? Is there any response, or law enforcement? Do they have to police heavier, or what's the response to this influx of inmates coming to our communities?
Well, they have to report to their parole or probation officer, and so I imagine that will be an increased caseload for our parole and probation officers who have limitations now because of COVID. You know, COVID is affecting a lot of different things with law enforcement. Um, Decreased patrol, decreased personal contact. So there's some difficulty there, but um, of course, it is going to be an increase on law enforcement, on patrol, on us in the criminal justice system. We prosecuted and convicted someone last week who'd only been out of custody 29 days on a very violent felony before he reoffended. So recidivism is a big problem. It's something that this Newsom administration does not take into consideration. The legislature has been continuously taking off the books laws that punish those who are repeat offenders. And so it's getting more difficult for law enforcement and district attorneys across the state to keep violent felons in custody for the time which they deserve.
The individual that you guys arrested after only 29 days of freedom, was that one of the folks that were initially released early due to COVID-19?
No, he was not.
Okay. Okay. And uh, how many folks are here from the early release of COVID-19 before April?
Say that one more time.
You said that there was 10,000 individuals released from the prison population before April due to COVID-19. How many of those individuals are in Kern County?
Okay, there were 10,000 people initially released from the Department of Corrections statewide beginning in April and May. I don't know how many of those were released to Kern County.
Okay, but we know for this next 8,000, there's 200 that will be coming in to Kern County.
A minimum of 200, we've been told so far.
Okay, got it. So clearly, I'm reading your statement that you released to us here. Clearly frustrated. Is this rolling back the very institution of criminal justice?
Oh, we're going back to the lawless times of the 1960s. It is a very, very alarming. This governor and the liberal legislature is dismantling the criminal justice system as we know it today. It is a matter of great concern to those of us in law enforcement, and we just hope that the public understands that we're doing our best, and the public needs to understand why these laws and the governor's decisions will increase crime. We're dealing in Kern County with the #1 homicide rate per capita in the state of California. And for the governor to release violent felons back into our community makes it even more difficult for us to keep the people of Kern County safe.
Right. Well, Cynthia, I appreciate your time. Is there anything I didn't ask that you'd like to add at this time?
Um,
Is there anything?
that victims of crime are our top priority. We want to make sure that people who are convicted and sentenced get what they are told they're going to get. And the governor is undoing that. And so that isn't right to victims. It's a slap in the face to victims. And it makes us concerned about people who don't need to be victims, but will be victims in the future.
Got it. Okay. Well, before I let you go here, do these folks have to report back to prison at a time, or are they just free?
They will be on probation or parole. And if they violate probation or parole, they may be eligible for return to custody. But
Okay.
that's about the only type of, and then of course the governor wants to decrease the amount of time a person is on parole.
Mm.
That's something
And
that he's looking at in the future.
when you're learning about all this stuff, do they tell you like how they choose Kern County? Are they originally from Kern County and they're returning here? How does
Yes.
that work?
Yes, they want to be paroled here because they're from here. Most of them, most of the inmates were sentenced, convicted and sentenced out of here. But this is where they want to be paroled because they're from here.
Okay, got it. Well, Cynthia, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry, last question. I get all these questions right as I feel like we're closing up here, but is there any inmate that you've looked over and you go, whoa, this one is a murder suspect or was a murder suspect or deadly aggravated assault or something like that that's coming back into our community? Are those folks in there?
I certainly saw one just like that, a gang member who was arrested for possession, being a felon in possession of a gun that had a prior strike. That was the suspect in a homicide.
Scary times. We gotta certainly pray here. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day. Stay well.